Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small, a podcast about brand development, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the modern world. In this episode, I'm joined by president and co-founder of Kodiak Cakes, Cameron Smith. As a child, Cameron's co-founder Joel used to roll around a wheelbarrow full of his mom's recipe for pancakes. When Cameron joined after college, he was asked to join for a marketing position. This later resulted in their success in retail stores, and later making them one of the top-selling pancake brands today. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Cameron Smith of Kodiak Cakes. Cameron, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, you bet. It's good to chat with you.
Yeah, so I want to start out with your childhood. So where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
That's a great question. So I grew up in Idaho for a little bit, and then Texas, then Nebraska. And I have six sisters. I'm the only boy, so a little bit bigger family. So you kind of have to fight for food and
Yeah,
fight for whatever you can get on the table. My dad taught in education, so we didn't grow up with a lot of money. My mom stayed home with all the kids, so it was a very scrappy upbringing, I guess you could say.
gotcha. So did you have an entrepreneurship mindset growing up? Did you ever sell anything as a kid or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. My pretty early on, since my dad didn't have a ton of money, he was always looking for side things to do. I remember
Hmm.
he would wash windows. There was a time when we would actually go with him to wash windows, and we loved it because we would go to a restaurant, wash the windows, and maybe we'd get a meal out of it. So as a kid, we loved helping him out because the opportunity to get food from a restaurant was pretty exciting. And
For
then
sure.
there were times when he actually dressed up as a clown a few times and went to birthday parties. And I'm thinking about it now. I'm sure you've got to be in a pretty humble state of mind, or
Totally.
really in a cash crunch to be willing to dress up as a clown. And he would blow balloons. And so for my dad, it was, I mean, we would rake leaves. I remember we would even do what's called worming, where you had this big solution you put in a big barrel. You would pour it on the ground at night, and then you grab night crawlers, and then you'd sell it to fishermen. So I feel like my whole upbringing was all about doing odds and ends
Wow.
jobs to try and make a little bit of money. And you know, when we first moved to Nebraska, I was 11 years old, and there was an opportunity to sell. My dad saw in the paper an opportunity that you could sell pop at the stadium,
Hmm.
which at the University of Nebraska football stadium, which seemed pretty exciting and pretty fun, but it was also a way to earn some money. So I did that from 11 all the way to 19.
Wow.
Every football season, I had jobs pretty early on. So it was very much about, all right, how can I make more money? How can I think differently? How can I work harder? So I mean, I learned pretty early on that if you just work hard enough,
Hmm.
things can work out a little bit better. But maybe they don't always work all the way that you want them to. But it was very much you get out what you put in.
That's awesome. So did you go on to go to college? And if so, what did you study?
I did. So I went to well, after high school, I went on an LDS mission for a couple of years to Zimbabwe.
Okay.
And that was pretty unique because the economy there was in a really hard place. So I saw a lot of people that just financially were just really struggling. And so that was a pretty different mindset that kind of helped frame up in my mind what I thought about, whether it's money or finances. And then I came back and went to just a small community college for a couple of years, and then I transferred over to the University of Utah, and I studied just business. I knew
Mhm.
I liked the idea of entrepreneurship. I didn't know at that time what that meant. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I actually was interviewing for jobs near the tail end of college before I met up with Joel at Kodiak Cakes, and I was in a job interview, and I thought the interview was going great. It was at a bank. I thought it was going to be pretty exciting, and the guy in the interview actually told me, he said, "Hey, you seem pretty entrepreneurial." And at that moment, I was like, "Yeah, great!" And I got pretty excited because I was like, "Oh, he actually sees what I'm thinking differently. This is great."
Yeah.
But for him, he almost took it as a not a great thing. Like it was not good. He wasn't looking for someone to think that way. It was almost looking for someone to think a certain way and kind of stay in that. And so, I would still get excited about ideas or different things we could do in college and studying business, just general business or management. I liked being able to learn a little bit about operations and finance and marketing and branding and all the little pieces without just focusing in one area. And I think that was just because there wasn't just one area that I loved. I loved knowing and understanding all parts and pieces of it.
For sure. So when you left college, did you have any other jobs prior to Kodiak Cakes besides this initial interview that you had?
I did, yeah. So before I met up with Joel, I actually sold tickets for the Utah Jazz for a couple of years. And then for a summer, a lot of people sell pest control and security systems. I actually sold food storage. I had a buddy here that was doing that here in Utah, and he was like, "Hey, it's great. It's freeze-dried food storage. You go door to door and you sell it." And I was naive enough to think that it would be an awesome way to earn, a summer's pay. I was fairly recently married, and so I did that for a summer and got pretty burned out doing that. And that's when I met up with Joel, and he just put a job up at the University of Utah's job board. I was looking for jobs, and I stumbled across it, and then met he and his dad was helping them at that time, kind of looking to retire. And Joel had been doing it for a handful of years prior to that, and we were around 800,000 when I joined. But when I met Joel and his dad, I got pretty excited because it was kind of matching my entrepreneur desire of being a part of a small company and being able to influence a lot of things. And that was kind of how I met up with Joel and some of the other jobs I had.
Okay, so what did the job description and title look like when you saw this offer from Kodiak Cakes? Were they looking for just someone to step on to help lead, or was it very broad, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask. When I actually passed the job post a couple of times because the job post said marketing manager.
Okay.
And I remember seeing it and thinking to myself, I'm not really a marketing manager. I didn't really go into marketing. I don't know that I have the experience to be a marketing manager. And so I thought I was really underqualified.
Yeah.
When I met Joel and his dad, I realized, hey, they actually didn't have a Facebook account at that time. Instagram wasn't really a thing, and so this was more of a, hey, can you reach out to PR and start just drumming up more awareness, and so it was more of that, and Joel at that time was, he was more looking for someone to kind of help and grow in these areas, but maybe not necessarily become a partner at that point.
Yeah.
It was more, if you could do our marketing, and I got excited because I was like, oh, this is sweet. There's nothing's been established. It's kind of a blank canvas. I can start the marketing up on social media and work with influencers and bloggers, because there was a lot there that you could dive into at that time that Kodiak Cakes wasn't doing much at all there. So for me, even though it was kind of more of a marketing focus, it was a great opportunity to work closely with Joel and really dive more into other parts of the business and help think differently and really become a partner over time.
Okay. And if you don't mind, for the listeners out there, can you explain the inspiration of Kodiak Cakes? I know this is prior to your time, but I read a little bit about the story and it's very inspiring. So just what made Joel actually want to start Kodiak Cakes prior to your joining?
Yeah. So all growing up for Joel, his mom would make, whole grain pancakes. She would make green smoothies before they were really cool and became a thing. So his mom, in a lot of ways, was kind of a health pioneer. And so for Joel, they always ate better. And they made this pancake mix that was, whole grain flours. You would fold in the egg whites, and it was just this very homegrown mix that they would just make at their house like a batter. So when Joel was 8 years old, his mom actually packed them into lunch bags and said, "Hey, why don't you go and sell this to the neighbors as a way to earn money and something to do." And so he went door to door, and when he did that, the neighbors thought it was great, and the neighbors actually responded to him and said, "Hey, can you bring us that mix again? That was really good." And so at that time it was like, "Hey, this is pretty cool." It didn't turn into anything for a little bit, and then years later, his older brother John was kind of looking for work and something to do, and was talking to his parents, and his mom was like, "Hey, what if you took that mix that we made? I mean, a lot of people loved it, and just made it into a brand and started selling it into grocery stores." And John at that time was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." He was late 20s, and pretty hungry for an entrepreneur experience. And so John did it for a little bit, turned it in, found a childhood friend that had became a designer, and had him help on the packaging and the designing of everything. The way they nailed down on Kodiak Cakes is years prior, Joel's dad actually did a surveying tour in Alaska.
Wow.
And loved being in Alaska, thought it was so cool. And they loved like the Kodiak bear and how fierce it is, but then also the Alaskan like frontier where things were simpler, they were cleaner. And so they got really excited about Kodiak and being a part of Kodiak, Alaska. And so the name Kodiak Cakes just kind of came from that, like Kodiak, like the bear, and then this frontier of, when life was simpler and cleaner. And so that's kind of how the brand was born. And John was selling it into gift shops in Jackson Hole here in Park City, and had a lot of success. And Joel was actually helping him on the side as well. And John he just kind of had a turning point where, years later he was just done, and he was like, "Look, I can't do this." I think sales were, just shy of $100,000 a year, and John was like, "This doesn't make sense." And he was just ready to be done. And Joel was in college, and he actually was talking to Joel one day and was like, "Hey, Joel, do you want this? I don't even want this anymore." And Joel, being young and hungry, was like, "Yeah, totally. I'll take this. This seems exciting." So Joel took it and started growing it, and got it up to around 400,000 in sales.
Wow.
Started selling into a little bit more grocery stores, and his dad started helping him, and Joel actually took a couple of steps away from Kodiak at different times, just to do some other things, to go back to school. And then there was a brief stint where he licensed it to someone else who was making products for us, and did that for a year. It wasn't going very well. Joel brought back the license, and then that's when his dad was like, "Look, Joel, I can't keep helping you. I've already retired from one job. I don't have the energy to keep doing this." And that's when Joel and I had connected. So enough time had passed before then. I think Joel was kind of in a stage of, all right, this is our last hurrah on this. Let's just see if we can get something going on with Kodiak.
Gotcha. What did Kodiak look like when you joined, packaging wise? Was it still like it currently is, or did you guys make a lot of changes when you hopped on?
Yeah. So I mean, it's evolved. I would say a lot of it has been pretty minor changes. It's always been in the craft box. We did. So in 2013, so I joined in 2009. 2013 is when we started putting protein in our pancakes. And that's when we came out with power cakes, so the higher protein.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we put the black border on the outside. So there's a lot of little design elements that we've added over the years. But prior to that, it was just a craft box with the bear and just, the whole grains for our main product. So for us, it's been more of a let's evolve this a little bit and let's really send the brand home to consumers. But let's also kind of stay true to who we've been over time of, this approachable, authentic brand.
Gotcha. So when you hopped on around 2008, what were some of the first things that you pursued for the company besides the social media and different advertising realms? What were some of the first tasks that they gave you?
Yeah, so that I mean that's a good question. A lot of it was let's dive into the social media side.
Yeah.
But there were also opportunities from a retailer front. So for me, I was pretty naive in that I didn't know what I didn't know. And sometimes that can be a bad thing for people. That For me, I think it ended up being a good thing because I didn't know what wasn't possible. And I think, Joel
Mm-hmm.
had been at a point where people had told him, no, you can't sell here. No, you can't do this. But for me, I was like, oh, I'll just call them. So I started calling retailers and gift shops, people that had bought Kodiak cakes before. Joel gave me this list of, hey, here are all these gift shops that used to buy Kodiak. Why don't you call them and see if they would be interested in bringing Kodiak cakes in again? And this time, the Kodiak wasn't making very much money. So as a
Mm-hmm.
result, when I would call these people, I would say, hey, gift shop in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, you guys carried Kodiak for a little bit. You guys want to carry it again? I can send you samples, but you got to pay for the samples.
Yeah.
And so at that point, asking people to pay for samples of a product that they're not sure they want to carry, it's kind of a big ask. A lot of times people will
Totally.
just send samples and then say, hey, give this a try and let us know what you think. We'd love to sell there. So we did that. I had a little bit of success, and while I was doing that, I just kind of realized early on that, man, this is going to be a long slog if I'm just reaching out to gift shops. That's not going to be a way for us to really grow. We've got to get into bigger retailers. We've got to get into the Targets of the world,
Yeah.
the Costcos of the world. And, so I was always looking past what Joel and I were talking about. We would talk about some of the social media things and I would execute against those things. But I was always thinking, well, what if we did this? What if we got into Target? And,
Mm-hmm.
and Joel was super supportive. He was very much, yeah, go for it, man. If you like, sure, give him a call. So I actually found out who the buyer was at Target, and I reached out to
Wow.
Target and just said, hey, we've got a pancake mix here called Kodiak Cakes. I'd love to talk to you about it. The buyer said, yeah, sounds great. I have time at this time. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, yeah, great. I can come out there. I remember talking to Joel and telling him like, hey, we got an appointment at Target. And he's like, no way, that's awesome. And he's like, oh shoot, man, I actually can't go. I've got something else going on those days. Why don't you just go? And I remember thinking to myself, this is like my first time going out. I actually I don't know what I'm supposed to or not supposed to be
Yeah,
saying in
that's
front of
huge.
buyers. I'm not sure what those relationships look like. And so, um, prior to that, we'd gotten a few other appointments at some other smaller retailers, and so it was able to give me a little bit of a dry run. But I went out to Target. I took we would always make pancake for the buyer, so I took a griddle with me and sat in front of the buyer. I made some Kodiak cakes,
That's
talked
awesome.
to the buyer about the brand, and showed her some like magazine articles, and we didn't have much data to give her real solid rationale as to why she should bring in Kodiak cakes. It was more the emotional, like, hey, here's what it would do, and
Mm-hmm.
here's what we have confidence in, and I'm sure. I mean, I know I was super nervous. I mean, here I am. I had just gotten out of college, maybe a year prior. I'm walking into Target's headquarters, which is very overwhelming
For sure.
headquarters. they have at that time over 1,600 locations throughout the U.S. And so I remember thinking, okay, this is pretty big, and I was super nervous. And so I'm sure for her, she just felt super bad and was like, I got to throw him a bone. I should probably at least bring it into a few stores just to give it a test, because this poor kid needs a break of sorts. And so she told us a little bit later, hey, yeah, guys, we're going to bring in Kodiak into 40 stores. And I remember Joel and I, we were stoked. We were like, oh, this is going to be so awesome. We're getting Target. It also was for me a big confidence builder, because I realized, hey, I can actually do this. I can get it into retailers. Hey, that was actually kind of fun. This is a different type of sales. It's more of like that relationship side. And I like the relationship side. And so I started to see that, I can reach out to other retailers. I can talk to other people, and I just need to set up appointments, because if I can get them face to face, that's going to be way different than just a call over the phone. And so I started I actually put together, so I was still trying to build the social media side, but now I was also thinking, well, if we're going to grow this, we got to get into more retailers like a Target. And if we have a Target, almost like an anchor retailer, that'll probably help other retailers be more likely to bring it in, kind of that domino effect.
Yeah.
So I went online and I was like, what are the top 100 retailers, grocery stores in the US? I put together this whole list, put it on Google Docs, and then I just started working that list. I'd find out who's the pancake buyer. A lot of times I would just call the receptionist and I would say, hey, who is the person who buys pancakes there? And they'd say, that's this person. Do you want me to transfer? No, I'm good. I was just curious. And I was like, do they actually have an email? Yeah, here's their email. Okay, perfect. I wanted to get enough information so that when I called the buyers, I could be fully prepared for what I was going to say and how I was going to talk to them. A lot of times, people are so busy, they don't, it's really common, they don't answer their phone. So there were a few times when I remember, this happened when I called Hy-Vee, and Hy-Vee is one of our better accounts today. We have a great relationship with them, and they've really leaned into Kodiak Cakes. But I remember years ago, I called Hy-Vee, and I was expecting it to go to voicemail and the buyer not to answer, and the buyer says, hello. And I remember thinking I was not prepared for this. And so I kind of stuttered. I was, hey, hey, we have pancakes. So I kind of threw me off, because I wasn't expecting it. But, I think what I realized is you need so many little victories. I think a lot of times people are looking for the big grand slam to bring everybody home and score all the runs. But really, if you're just getting little victories along the way, those can propel you a week, 2 weeks, a month longer, and those can propel you through the next couple of phone calls, because you've seen, all right, we got that little success, awesome, now let's build on that, let's build on this. And you still have stumbles and bumps along the way, but those little victories can really do a lot for you.
For sure. So when you landed that first Target spot, were the locations scattered across the U.S., or did they put you in a certain region, or how did that go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they told us, hey, here are the 40 locations that we've identified. Either they're good for better for you products or the location. And it was, you're exactly right, it was spread throughout the U.S. And the way we fulfilled it is we packed the cases in our office and shipped them out. So, and that's also what I did. So the thing about being an entrepreneur, it sounds great when your business gets to a large state where you're kind of more managing it and just thinking through the strategies.
Yeah.
Earlier on, you're trying to get social media going, and then you're selling to Target, and then you've got to go in the back room and prepare the shipment for Target, because you don't have enough money to hire all these roles. So I spent a lot of time preparing the shipments for Target and sending them out so the product could get on the shelf. And then I would go in to Target's website and see the data to see how they were performing. And then I was trying to think through, how can I get these sales to increase, and what do I need to do, and how can I target these locations to drive more sales, because it wasn't just every Utah or every Colorado location that we could really just dive into and blow out. Target really wanted to know, can this work throughout the US? And if it does, then let's keep growing. So that buyer moved off the desk, and we got a new buyer, and our new buyer said, hey, I'd love to meet with you guys and talk a little bit about Kodiak Cakes. So we went out to Minneapolis and met with that buyer, and he told us at that time, he said, hey guys, look, I think what the brand is doing right now, and this is before Power Cakes,
Okay.
is really great. I think the product's turning well. Could you guys put together a plan for what we would do if we expanded into 1,500 stores? So if we were to go into 1,500 stores,
Wow.
what would you guys be able to do from a pricing standpoint, from a promotion standpoint, or is and I remember Joel and I walking out of that meeting, just like, oh, wait, he's thinking 1,500 stores? That would be nationwide. That would be insane. And now we're thinking, shoot, what are we going to do? And we were only maybe 2 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And so at that time we were like, wow, shoot, that would be really big. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this would be awesome. Okay, this would be great. In Joel's mind, he's thinking, oh shoot, okay, do we have the money for that? How are we going to pay for that? We've got to figure that out, because that first order could be pretty big. So
Yeah.
they did lean in, and that first order was, $250,000, which at that time was super significant. And
for sure.
And we were like, okay, how are we going to get this produced and make sure that we can send it to Target? And I actually remember, on new stores, Target had a policy that it wasn't a 30-day time period that they would pay you. It was 60 days before they would pay you. And I remember Joel and I talking, and he had actually had to borrow some money from his dad to fulfill that order. And, he said to me, he said, hey, could you reach out to the buyer at Target and see if we could have them release payments sooner? I was like, yeah, totally. So I reached out to the buyer. I was like, hey, we're in a little bit of a tighter spot. Could you guys release the payment? And the buyer's like, yeah, sure. Let me see what I can do. So they actually released payment sooner, which helped us significantly. But pretty early on, we were not afraid to ask questions. The approach was very much, look, it's okay if you don't know something, just ask the question. And the worst response that people would say is no, but is that really that bad? So let's just ask it. So a lot of times we ask because we just didn't know. And we were fortunate to have some buyers that were thoughtful and helpful in navigating a lot of those potholes pretty early on.
Totally. When you got the spot with Target for the nationwide sale, did they give you like a heavy lockdown and time frame for production? Did you have to have the packages ready for them in a short span, or how was that?
Mm-hmm. They did, yeah. So the way it works is, they would maybe tell you in March, like, hey, in March we are looking to expand this nationwide. Do you guys have the capability to service it nationwide? And we would probably change over the shelves in June or July, so that you have that window to get everything ready, to make sure that you can ramp up production, which is including all those pieces that you talked about, which is supply and packaging and so on and so forth. So we got back to him and said, yep, we can do it. We're good for those dates. And so we moved forward, and usually it ships, a couple of weeks or a month before they're changing over the shelves. And so that's where once it ships, that's when the time period starts for them paying you back. But they worked a lot with us early on when it was shipping, when they would need everything, so that it would be pretty seamless.
For sure. I saw that you guys went on to the show Shark Tank, and for a company, especially where you guys were at this time, this is huge for advertisement. You guys actually locked in a spot airing. What was that experience like, and what made you pursue Shark Tank?
Yeah, that's it. The Shark Tank experience was pretty unique. So I had watched Shark Tank for a couple of years, and with my wife, we were big fans of the show, and I remember one day talking to someone who was helping at the office, and she was like, "Hey, why did you guys think about going on Shark Tank?" I was like, "It's a great thought. I mean, I love the show, but I'd actually never put those pieces together." So I was talking to Joel, and I was like, "Hey, Joel, we should try to get on Shark Tank. That could be a great way to get publicity.
Yeah.
And if the deal makes sense, maybe we could get a good partner out of it too, because that could also help grow the brand." I mean, the biggest thing that we needed awareness and trial. And that's the biggest thing for that small brands are just thirsty for and that they want. And so I reached out to Shark Tank. I sent an email to them and just said, hey, here at Kodiak Cakes, would love to be on the show. We could use an investment from an experienced investor. We've never brought on any money prior to that, any private equity money. So we would be really interested. I didn't hear anything back until about a month or so later. I got this phone call at my house at night, and it said California. I remember thinking, I don't know that I know anyone in California. And they said, hey, we're producers or casting directors for Shark Tank. Just want to talk to you a little bit about Kodiak Cakes. And I remember thinking, whoa, okay, sweet, cool. And so I talked to them, and then they said, yeah, we'd be really interested in talking to you guys and having you come on the show. And I remember Joel and I, we put together a video for them. We filled out all the paperwork. They then put us in contact with some producers that would help us, just be prepared for the show and make sure that we're thinking about everything that we need to be thinking about. And then we went on the show, and when we went on the show, we didn't totally know what to expect. We did a little bit because I had watched the show. But you're in there for maybe 30 to 45 minutes, and they're just asking you a lot of questions. They're talking to you. It was a really, really good experience. They were really respectful. They asked some really hard questions, but we walked out of there that where we were at and where we were thinking we could do a deal and where they were at were pretty far apart. That for us, we were like, it doesn't make sense. Let's not do a deal. And we didn't know if it was actually going to air or not. And we were hopeful that it would. And pretty fortunately it did 9 months later. And, once that hit, it has been the gift that keeps on giving. It continues to air on, CNBC, and whenever it airs, we get people writing in saying, oh yeah, I saw this on Shark Tank. And so it was a great experience, and it continues to be a really strong part of what's helped us get to where we are.
That's awesome. So when it does air, do you notice like a huge increase in sales as well?
We do notice a little bump early on. We saw a huge, once it did first air, we saw a big bump. We sold out at Target. We were scrambling to get product back on shelves. Our website crashed a couple of times. There was a huge influx of demand, which we had never experienced before. Once it now, since when it re-airs, we see a little bump, maybe in online orders. We don't notice it as much at retail because we're in a lot of retailers, and it's hard to find out exactly what those little peaks. But it is more online when we notice it.
Gotcha. So looking at Kodiak Cakes today, what would you say separates your brand from your competitors?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think we think a lot about branding and think a lot about what is the Kodiak consumer and what do they care about and what are we trying to be as a brand. I think what you see a lot of products at times that come out with just functional benefits. There's been a big keto craze, which isn't as strong now as it was before. You had the fiber years where brands are just focusing on one functional benefit for consumers that they're looking for or caring about at that time. At Kodiak Cakes, we've tried to make sure that the brand is more than just a product, that really it's about inspiring healthy eating and active lifestyles with nourishment for today's frontier. So it's all about how are we nourishing people and families for whatever is in front of them today, whether they're exercising, playing sports as a family, or going on rides or runs individually or together. How are we nourishing them? And that nourishment, it doesn't just come from protein or it doesn't just come from whole grains. It comes from the combination of all of it. Of, okay, how can we make sure that all the ingredients that we have are clean and approachable ingredients? And then also, how can we make sure that the nutrition is balanced in such a way that it gives you the energy that you need for whatever activities that are in front of you? So for Kodiak, we think a lot about that. And then the branding element for us we want to make sure that it's authentic, that we are who we are. And,
Yeah.
that means it's being approachable, being fun and playful, not taking yourself too seriously. And I think a lot of times people want to just say, this is what the brand is, or, they try and put you in a box. And for us, we want to be really thoughtful on what we're doing well and how we can keep growing that. We have had competitors, pretty early on in the pancake category. I remember talking to some buyers and they told us, look, this is pancakes. We're not doing much in this category. It's a commodity for us. And so they wouldn't bring our items in because they just didn't care about the category. And now you look at the pancake category and there are so many brands running after this relatively small category in comparison to other categories in the grocery store. And all because, we brought a lot of awareness to this category. So what happens is, the water, people say the water rises, right? So we brought in those incremental users, people who had never had, or who hadn't had pancakes in a while, or at least bought them from the store. And now we gave them a reason to buy it. So the water rose, the category grew. So what happens is everyone wants to start throwing their ship in the water, because if the tide's rising, it's rising all ships.
For sure.
And so that's kind of the view for some people. They say, well, let's just do this. They're not taking care of this segment. So for Kodiak, we want to make sure that we are different, that we stand out as different, and that we own our space and our territory, and and make sure that we're being proactive and not just reactive in everything that we're doing.
That's awesome. So what would you say are your top selling products today?
Our top selling products, it's funny, we came out with Pancakes in early 2014. And so in the last 6 years, that has continued to be our top selling product. It does really, really well. We have frozen waffles that we've launched, and those are doing incredibly well. We have oatmeal packets and oatmeals and cups that are doing really well. But a lot of it is just those core items in those categories of whole grains and protein. Just the basic flavor that turns the best for us.
Gotcha. So what I like to ask each guest at the end of each episode is, if you could share one piece of advice to an aspiring entrepreneur, what would that be? Maybe something you've learned or regret, just anything.
Yeah, it's funny. It becomes the what I wish I would have known.
Yeah.
I would say, one of the things my advice would be kind of twofold. And it would be, one, keep pushing forward, keep knocking down doors. Don't listen to people all the time. Listen to people to learn and take what you want to know, but keep trying, keep thinking differently. And the other piece of that is that thinking differently, it would be think bigger. Think bigger on where you're trying to go. Something I think a lot about is if you don't know, if you come to a fork in the road and you don't know where you ultimately want to go, then it actually doesn't matter which path you take on that fork in the road.
Yeah.
If you know where you're trying to go, just work on that path. It may not work out, but at least you tried and you're pushing on that path. And so I wish I could have said years ago, yeah, I know Kodiak's going to be 80 plus employees, over 200 million in revenue. Yeah, that's where we're going. I wish I could have said that, but I had no clue. I didn't have that vision, but I was hungry and I wanted to get there. Had I had that vision, would things have changed? Potentially. Or maybe it was better not to have that vision, but I at least knew that I wanted to go somewhere. And so as much as you can expand your vision and start going in that path, and just knocking down doors, I think you'll be surprised at what you're able to achieve.
For sure. Well, Cameron, thank you so much for joining me today. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Kodiak Cakes at kodiakcakes.com.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of Starting Small. If you would, leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, follow Starting Small Pod on social platforms to keep up to date on future guests.